What book do you think every person should read at least once? The Ucking Manual. A Guide to the Wildlife in Your Area. Man's Search for Meaning, by Viktor E. Frankl. All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque. Actually, the saddest novel I've ever read, but probably the only one that describes the absurdity of war in such a suggestive way. Night by Elie Wiesel. The Wave. Really illustrates how people living in Germany in the 20s and 30s got so swept into the AZI party, supporting Hitler. Short read and very pointed. UCK Now I have to read 2.5k books, at least once. Where the Sidewalk Ends. Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. Absolutely heart-wrenching, incredible story. 1984. I know they've been said, but 1984, Fahrenheit 451 and To Kill a Mockingbird. On a personal note, The Giver, all 4 books. They really challenge what one might see as set in stone and are poignant. Will probs make you cry? Have you ever dreamed of doing something your whole life only to find out, once you did it, that you hated it? What was it? I want to be an environmental lawyer when I grow up. I'm going to help save the world. Ucking kill me dude. I don't even have the energy to save myself anymore. Moving to another country. I loved the romantic idea of moving to a new place and finding out about the culture. Turns out it's expensive, it's complicated and it's tiring as UCK. Only silver lining is that I'll have a few good stories to tell. To no one since I basically lost all my friends. All my life I wanted to make cartoons. I fought with tooth and nail to reach the top. Then I interned for an old studio in Burbank specializing in cartoons about a certain yellow family. Then, after college, I became a mechanic and never looked back. I couldn't wait to pull G's in an airplane. Fenny did. It sucked. Music production, which is what I majored in. As soon as I graduated from college, I realized how much I hate sitting in a recording studio doing the same thing over and over again, only to scrap it and do it over yet again. Turned out to be brutally technical, drawn out and boring with very little reward, and it took all of the fun out of music for me. Even the pros I worked with who were doing objectively well seemed miserable most of the time due to having to work with some truly insufferable people and never getting the recognition they felt they deserved. And half of them were alcoholics, chain smokers or insomniacs with pronounced depression. Edit. Rather than pursue a career in music production, I focused on enjoying being in a band and got a day job to support my hobby. Turned out to be far more sustainable, and once I got married and had a kid, requiring me to take a step back and focus on my family, I had already established myself at a decent job with benefits. I'm not suggesting this is the path one should take, but almost everyone I know who was trying to make it 20 years ago is still struggling to pay bills and gain traction despite whatever talent or success they've had. What I am suggesting is that if you decide to pursue a career in the arts, have something to fall back on. The industry is brutal, it requires constant networking, long hours, and it is very easy to get burned out. Trust me, you do not want to be living paycheck to paycheck in your 40s with nothing to show for it, no benefits, no assets, just an occasional cover band or sound guy gig and a nasty drug, alcohol addiction. And all because you didn't have a backup plan. Being an EMT, I had planned on it being my lifelong career since middle school. I loved the medical field and wanted to save lives, but knew I wouldn't have the stamina to get through medical school. I got into training as soon as I graduated high school, and I was top of my class in the educational sense, but as soon as I started doing ride-alongs, everything just kind of fell apart on me. I didn't fit in well with the firefighters, which sounds stupid, but I think I really needed that brotherhood if I was going to survive in that field. The real problem, however, was my empathy. I knew quickly that I would not be able to see people on their worst days every day. I could deal with broken bones and blood, but I hadn't prepared myself for the screams. On my third ride along, I responded to a teenage suicide, and that was it for me. I work for a museum now, lol. Being the boss of people. Boss is a title, but being an effective leader of people is an emotionally draining, often thankless roller coaster. I grew up feeling passionate about physics and always planned on being a professional physicist. Got my undergrad, started a PhD program, and spent a good time in the program before absolutely hating it. The politics, the narrow spectrum of novel research, the terrible grad school pay, being far from home, etc. Got super depressed and had to reevaluate my career, even though I spent so much time on this path. It all wasn't worth a field in which I lost my drive. Ended up leaving the program and working for the government for a few years before returning to grad school for statistics. Best time of my life, and I got a permanent research position at an R1 university in my home state, where I have been to. The day. TLDR, spent a ton of time going to school for something that was only fun until you hit the professional level. Changed to a different field and never looked back. Visiting Vegas. I loved the idea of a city based on games. Turns out, I like fair games. Traveling for work. You spend a lot of time in hotels and rarely get the opportunity to see anything besides that due to flight schedules. And being hungover on an airplane is an AWFUL experience. I heard this story from a friend, and have no reason to believe it's fake, but I never met any of the people involved. There's a couple. The husband really wanted a threesome their entire marriage. The wife always refused, at least partially because they had a kid, and she didn't want their sexcapades to affect the child in. Anyway, fast forward 20 years or so, the kids are all out of the house, and the husband keeps bringing it up, not sure he ever stopped, really. The wife just so happened to have a coworker that she was becoming really good friends with, who she also found very attractive, and so one day, prior to the husband's birthday, the wife asked her coworker if she would be down to join her and her husband. The coworker said yes. Husband's birthday, the wife surprises him with the threesome. Afterwards, the husband's reaction was, well, that wasn't really the mind-blowing experience I expected it to be. Oh well, my wife is awesome for doing that for me. Now, I might be missing a few details here, but the wife realized she enjoyed being with the other woman far more than she enjoyed being with her husband. She ended up leaving her husband and is now in a committed relationship with the coworker. Blacksmithing. I watched a ton of blacksmithing content on YouTube, got super intrigued and wanted to build my own setup in the backyard. My father talked me into trying a class before jumping in head first, and I am glad I did. My father and I were the only two in the class that day, so we got all the attention from the instructor, which was awesome. He really helped us both perfect our techniques and corrected any mistakes quickly so we didn't form any bad habits. It was the best instructor I have ever had for anything. Guy was an amazing teacher. He even offered to let us stay for a couple more hours to make another piece, which we took him up on. After all that, an amazing class, 3 metal pieces that I worked on and created by myself. By hand, I walked away, dissatisfied. I think metal as a medium just felt very hard to work with. Everything is super hot and dangerous, and I just didn't see myself wanting to ever do it again. I really recommend taking a class to try something out rather than spending time and money to build your own setup for something you may hate. I spent $75 to save thousands. Being a chef, I left high school in year 10 to get a cert in commercial cookery as I loved cooking and making dishes at home. Loved it for the first few months, then realized how draining it is. I do split shifts 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. then 5 p.m. - 9, sometimes 9:30 p.m. It's exhausting after doing it for 4 years. You lose your appetite completely. I recently had a knee injury and have been off for a few weeks. It's really made my anxiety and depression calm down after not being torn to bits by chefs who have had 20+ years of experience and know everything. It's making me realize I've chosen the wrong career choice. What is a video game you think everyone needs to play at least once in their life? Portal or Half-Life? Awesome games. Tetris. It puts all other games in context. The original Super Mario Bros. For the NES. At least 1-to-1 and 1-to-2 edit. I am referring to Super Mario Bros. On the NES, World 1 Level 1, and SMB World 1 Level 2. Nothing about SMB 2 or 3. Well, this essentially turned into what's your favorite game or what game are you playing right now? Roller Coaster Tycoon. Everyone should experience the thrill and fun of Left 4 Dead 2 when you're playing with 3 of your friends. Stardew Valley. Rarely do I find a video game that's truly relaxing in the traditional sense of the word, but this one is one of them. Edit. I certainly didn't expect this simple post-totake off the way it has. Thank you for the awards, and I'm glad that Stardew Valley means that much to so many of you. It does to me, too. Stardrops all around. BioShock. Shadow of the Colossus. I remember how the otherwise brilliant Roger Ebert kept saying he just couldn't see video games as art, and I kept thinking, if someone would just tie him to a chair and force him to play Shadow of the Colossus, he'd come around. Guess we'll never get the chance now. Honorable mentions. Silent Hill 2, Price of Persia. Sands of Time, Zelda: Link to the Past. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. What is something you deeply regret doing as a child that still affects you to this day? When I was 4, a neighbor girl and I became friends. I invited her over one day to play. We were playing with dog food. It was fake food. Well, she started eating it. I screamed at her and called her nasty and was just hitty. Told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. As it turned out, the poor girl was severely neglected. Her parents never had food. So she was basically starving. It didn't dawn on me until I saw that they were kicked from their home and it was condemned and torn down a year after. I remember I went over to play one time and the house smelled like rotting hamburger meat. There were cockroaches everywhere. It was traumatizing. I cannot imagine living there. I have tried to find the girl via social media with no luck. When I was 5, me and a friend found a frog down by the river. Being kids, we had no common sense yet. We kept throwing it in the air and watched it bounce off the ground, thinking it must be having fun. It died, of course. At 60, I still can't look at a frog without feeling guilty. In middle school, I jumped from the top of a slide and landed flat on the bottom, hurting my back. Pretty sure I've never recovered. Giving up my dog. When I was 11, my parents got me a lab puppy who adored. I raised her for 2 years. She grew up to be an amazing dog but had high energy and my dad never watched her. Even if we needed him to, he refused on started itching. So when I needed to go to the hospital for a broken leg, my one request was just watch her. This once. He said yes. Then when I came back a couple days later, she developed a UTI and almost starved because he didn't feed her, give her water, or let her out once. Not once. Taking care of the UTI was so hard to handle, so my mom gave me a choice. Let her suffer because he wasn't going to buy the proper medication, or give her up. So I gave her up. Then I became a problem. Because I hated my dad for not getting medication for my dog, whose condition could kill her, but buying painkillers for his hitty dog who had an abscess on his foot. When I was 16, I went back to the shelter in hopes of finding her there, healthier than the day I gave her up. She died at the shelter because nobody adopted her or helped her. The infection spread to her kidneys, causing them to shut down. I cried. I hated my dad as much as humanly possible and I miss her so much. Not sleeping in my dying father's bed with him. He asked me to because he didn't want to be alone. I was 18 at the time and wasn't not prepared for all this. Until the day I die, I will never forgive myself. I took everything to heart. All the insults, all the failures, all the minor mishaps. I couldn't just let it pass me by. It hit me right in the heart, which is why my current mental health leaves a lot to be desired. One time when I was 6 to 7, I rode on a four-wheeler with my older sister. We hit a dip in my grandparents' pasture. My sister fell off and she went under the rear tire. She needed immediate surgery. My grandmother still blames me for it and it has affected me deeply. For years I listened to how my sister almost died due to my negligence. Stop exercising, any kind of working out because I was told my movement is awkward. Tried to shrink myself because I was a tall girl that stands out. Oh father kids, which ruined my posture. Now I have a very bad scoliosis that caused mild but chronic back pain. It's very visible as my waist is not symmetrical. Might have to go under a big surgery, putting braces to my spine, in the next 3 to 4 years. Sad face edit. Thank you. I didn't know scoliosis is purely caused by genetics. When I was 13 or 14, I saw one of my lifelong friends walking down the street, blank stare with her makeup running. I was on my bicycle racing to get home before my 8 p.m. curfew, so I didn't stop to talk to her. She committed suicide that night, and I was the last person to see her alive. I went through intense therapy after that, as I was filled with guilt and grief. I still have issues with that guilt today, some 21 years later. I regret not having thicker skin and sticking up for myself from my bullies. There were 2 individuals who were complete psychos and went out of their way to make several people's lives hell. One girl was so crazy she tried running my friend off the road driving home from school. She is now in prison for embezzling from her employer. Not applying myself more in my studying in high school.